The meeting of the Public Safety Committee is now called to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderman Bosley. Alderman French.
Present.
Alderman Vaccaro.
Present.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Carter.
Present.
Alderman Coulter. Alderwoman Spencer.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Chairman Kennedy.
Here.
6 present, you have a quorum.
Here, would you please excuse Coder and Bosley?
Everybody.
So noted.
Did 4 already.
This will be everybody.
We're here today to continue the interviews with the nominees for the Civilian Oversight Board. We have heard from 4 individuals so far, and we have 3 remaining that we will speak to and have the opportunity to meet today. See, Alderman Cone is here. We'll first start off with Ms. Ciera Simril. Okay, I did it. I can really murderize a word, so a name. So would you please step forward here and have a seat? This is the Public Safety Committee of the Board of Aldermen and is responsible for confirming the nominees for the Civilian Oversight Board. First of all, we thank you for applying and having an interest in being on this particular board. We know that it will take time out of people's schedules, and it is an unpaid position that will take commitment, and so we thank you for your interest in serving on the board. If you could just tell us a little bit about your background and why you're interested in being a member of the Civilian Oversight Board.
Okay, well, as far as my background, I attended Soldan High School, graduated from there, went on to Lincoln University, didn't finish there, came home, finished at the University of Missouri St. Louis with my BA in Communications. I've been a lifelong advocate in the community as far as the neighborhood ownership model. Me and my father helped facilitate it in North Point, and then it grew over to Walnut Park East and West. And then at one point, I was employed by North Newstead Association, where I helped kind of like, I guess, like regroup the Penrose and O'Fallon Park neighborhood. Been in the community doing different things. I'm a member of the Federation of Block Units, and a list of other things that I really can't come up with right now, but pretty much I'm a community person. So I feel like I was the perfect fit for this.
Questions from members of the committee? Alderman French.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? I do remember you working in the O'Fallon and Penrose neighborhood, so it's good to see you again. So just what prompted you? Did you speak to anybody? Did anybody ask you to put in your name for nomination?
Well, another resident over in the Walnut Park area had submitted my name, and I didn't know anything about it until I was actually notified by the organization CapCar saying, hey, someone put your name forth. I was on the end of trying to get other people to try to apply. Somehow I ended up in the middle of it, and I ended up being a candidate.
That happens.
That happens, right? You get other people, they get you.
Yes, that's exactly what happened.
So you did go through the whole CapCar process?
Yes, and I filled the application out for the mayor's office as well.
Okay. And, well, what ward are you in, the 27th ward?
Yes.
All right. Now I've got a whole bunch more questions for you now. We'll take it easy. So how do you see your role as a possible member of this board? What do you think the role of the Civilian Oversight Board is, and what your place would be on that board?
I feel like my place on that board would actually give a better perspective for the younger generation of the city, because we're getting younger, and the fact that I would be able to influence a little bit more, I guess, as far as them wanting to actually become involved within city, organizations. I definitely want to bring something different to the board as far as just bringing clarity and being able to bridge the gap of communication between residents and the elected officials of the city, because a lot of people do not feel comfortable coming forth talking to certain people, whereas me being an advocate in the community, they may feel more comfortable to come tell me.
Okay. Have you ever had a negative run-in with police?
Not here in the city of St. Louis, no. But at Lincoln University, yes, it was public safety officers.
And what happened there?
Definitely was stopped for no apparent reason and had my car searched and was handcuffed and kicked down on the ground and ended up in the hospital that night.
How did that make you feel?
I definitely did not feel good about it. It was definitely a degrading experience, but it didn't do anything, I guess, as far as like making me judge all police officers like that, because it was a campus police officer versus an actual, real officer of the city. It was definitely life-changing. It definitely gave me a different perspective, especially being so young. I was in college when this happened, so it was tough, but I managed to move and put my best foot forward. That's why I really want to be able to help as far as youth is in St. Louis, because a lot of them have gone through the same thing.
Did you file a formal complaint in that case?
Yes, and nothing happened. Lincoln offered some money, and we weren't having it because that wasn't, enough for my peace of mind for me to even finish school there after that.
So you kind of touched on this a minute ago, but do you think that in any way would make you less than impartial on this board, that experience?
I definitely wouldn't, I guess, how can I put it? It definitely wouldn't cloud any of my judgment or anything like that, because officers are people as well, just as well as community members, So, I definitely would be able to understand both sides of the spectrum to be able to pass a proper, result as far as whatever the situation is at hand.
Okay. Do you have any family or friends who are employees of the police department?
No.
Okay. No other questions?
Alderman Vaccaro?
Thank you so much. I was just reading it, and it said you had both positive and negative experience.
Yes.
What were maybe a positive experience that you may have had?
Positive experiences I've had with law enforcement in St. Louis County, that definitely was a different experience. I've never had anything happen in the city of St. Louis. Most positive experience that I've had working with law enforcement is possibly on the neighborhood ownership model. That's definitely been a good program to have, where you could take the officer to the person's front door and be able to help them, because crime is a huge epidemic in the city right now, and people do not want to go, to the police by themselves.
And I saw that on there too, and that, I agree 100%, that neighborhood ownership is, and it's great that you're doing it. Obviously, you're going to be a great asset to the board, but I just read that and thought, well, I'd ask. But anyway, God bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God bless you. I always say that.
You do say that. Alderman Cone?
I don't have any questions at this time. I want to give the more junior members of the panel an opportunity to ask questions.
You're getting ready to be. Alderman Carter?
Yes, just one question. Good morning.
Good morning.
So you are close with a few officers. What if it is a scenario where those officers are being reviewed for something? Would you stay involved in the process, or will you recuse yourself so you won't have to vote in support or non-support of your friend?
Well, I don't look at any of those officers as far as being my friends. I've had to deal with them in certain scenarios, I guess just as far as the NOM is concerned, but by us having a new officer now, that would definitely be something where I wouldn't mind recusing myself from it if I had a closer relationship with that officer, but I feel like if I don't know you well enough to know what your toilet looks like, then no.
Great answer. No more questions, thanks.
Alderwoman Spencer?
Sure. Thank you again. We just met here, but really appreciate your willingness to serve on the board. You have a very impressive amount of community involvement. I think that of all the people we have seen so far, you by far have been the most involved in your community, and that is something that is really, really important piece of serving on the board, being able, as you mentioned in your intro, to help bridge those gaps by being a bridge from the community to this Board of Aldermen, city government, et cetera. And so that's really admirable, the work you've done with your community, and I commend you for that. especially at such a young age.
Yes.
On your resume here, you have experience doing some writing. I see that you've been involved in the St. Louis American as an intern, and you have authored a few pieces. Do you foresee yourself publishing or writing about your experiences on the board?
No, I actually haven't, I guess, put that much thought into that portion of it. When I was an intern there, of course, Chris King gave me a lot of free reign to talk about different things, but I haven't written anything for them for a while. So,
do you remember any of the things you did write about?
yes, I wrote a piece on, I believe it was called Priority on the People. I wrote a few opinion columns. I wrote one about my nephew that was shot and killed, about like how that experience changed us as a family. Yeah, it was a few that I covered. I don't really remember all of them, but yeah.
Great. And are you still involved in the work with the neighborhood ownership model? Do you see this impacting your ability to continue the significant volunteer work you're currently doing?
I mean, I feel like the board is definitely, I guess, like I'm gonna keep it completely separate from my neighborhood ownership model duties. Of course, if anything, I'm sure I'm gonna run into more people possibly wanting to talk to me about different things. But I definitely look at it as, I guess, a plus, but I really want to keep them both separate.
Great. I think that sounds like a good plan. So I think that does it for my questions. Really impressive community involvement.
Thanks.
Okay. Alderwoman Green?
I don't think I have any more questions at this time. Thank you.
Alderman Vaccaro has a follow-up question.
I'm curious, you said your nephew was shot and killed. Was that by a police officer, or was it?
No, it happened in Indiana. It was pretty much just a bad situation. Some kids tried to set him up, and he was shot and killed at the age of 18, so, yeah.
Yeah, we were, in fact, I was talking about that with, not that one, but the amount of violence going on in the city, and I certainly side with Alderman French that we have to have some sort of a comprehensive plan, which I will support and do support. So I was just curious. Thank you.
Any other? Alderwoman Davis, do you have any questions? Okay.
I do have
Alderman Carter.
one question. I'm just curious, this is a new board that's being established, and, the kind of rules and purview of which are still, being worked out in some accord. But I am curious about, like, the level of confidentiality. I mean, a lot of the issues that are going to be brought forth before this board are going to be personnel related. And so just curious your take on that responsibility and how you would handle, the confidentiality of information being shared with the board.
Okay, well, yeah, I'm definitely aware of the confidentiality. I've had previous jobs. I work for a bank, so I have to maintain a lot of confidentiality right now. So I don't think I would have a problem with that at all, as far as not communicating anything outside of that room with my peers. Of course, when I walk out of that room, I walk out of that room with whatever information I have, and that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there's no other questions from members of the committee, then we thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Next, we will have before the committee Ms. Heather Highland. Come right on up and have a seat. Good morning. We'd like to thank you also for having an interest and in being on the Civilian Oversight Board, as was mentioned, and I failed to say that earlier. This is a new process for the city, and so we're making history, which also means there's a learning curve as we go through this. So if you would just take a moment and just talk a little bit about yourself and why you're interested in serving on the Civilian Oversight Board.
Sure. I'm originally from Kansas City. I moved to St. Louis in 1996 or 97. I finished my degree at UMSL in criminal justice and Spanish, and I went to law school at SLU. And when I was at SLU, I started interning with Fredman and Fredman, and I'm still there 15 years later. So I've lived in the city since 2001, and I own a home in Dutchtown. And being in Dutchtown, when I first moved there about 9 years ago, it was great. It was fine. To this day, really, even my neighbors, I know all my neighbors, they're good people, but there's a lot of things that happen in our neighborhood that are not so good. We have a lot of shootings, there's a lot of heroin, there's a lot of guns, and I think part of the problem, seems to me, is there's a loss of confidence in the police department. And as a result of that, the police department can't solve crimes because they don't have people that have confidence in them to tell them what's happening. I also am a criminal defense lawyer, and so I get clients that come in and they say, well, you know, the police officers treated me this way or treated me that way, or, you know, I had money on me and it wasn't in my property after I, you know, was released, and I want to know where my money went. There's no confidence. And when you say, well, you can file a complaint, internal affairs, they're like, that's not going to do me any good. They're not going to follow through with my complaint, you know. And so I think, and I've actually been sort of following the establishment of this, because obviously until the city got control of the police department, there wasn't going to be an oversight board. And so when they established control, I know that the Board of Aldermen worked really hard on trying to get something together, and I've kind of been interested in it for a while, because I think our city needs some change. Something needs to happen.
Thank you. Alderman French, any questions?
Thank you. Good morning. So you worked for a time in the public defender's office?
I interned actually in St. Louis City, and as an undergrad, I also interned in St. Louis County.
I imagine you heard from your clients lots of police activity, or how did that, what was that experience, and did you hear a lot from your clients about their interactions with police?
I did, and actually I still do. People, it seems, have a lot of sort of negative experiences. You know, they feel that they aren't treated fairly, or that police officers are unnecessarily, I don't want to say abusive physically, but even just verbally abusive, you know, calling them names, or just, you know, sort of being out of line, so to speak. And I think that, you know, until we get to a point where people feel comfortable talking to police officers, our crime rate's going to stay where it is. It's not, nothing's going to change. It's not going to get any better. And hopefully, if we have this oversight board, that we say, look, we're neutral, we review everything, we recommend punishments for the officers who are bad, we say, you know what, this officer didn't do anything wrong. Hopefully that'll somehow bridge the gap between, you know, the community and, you know, make them want to file complaints and say, well, I feel confident that my complaint is going to get sufficient review, because it's not just police officers reviewing police officer conduct. There are these citizens out here who are also going to be behind them reviewing what they've done.
I agree with you. So what do you think you bring to this board? I know you are an attorney, but how do you think you will fit as a voice among those many on that board?
Well, I think that sort of my experience as an attorney, obviously I am an advocate for my client, but at the same time you have to give your client sort of a review of what their case about, no matter what kind of case it is. And so you have the ability, you sit and you look at everything that's put before you and give them honest advice on sort of what's going to happen. And obviously I'm not an advocate in this situation, but I have the ability to sit and review everything. You know, when you're getting ready for a trial and people say, well, I have all these witnesses to testify, you have to talk to these people, and you have to say, you know, I talked to, you know, Jane, Joe, and Mary, and I think Joe is being honest, but I don't think Jane and Mary are being honest. And I think if a jury, you know, were to review them or talk to them, they're not going to find them believable or credible. And so you have to be able to weigh the credibility of witnesses and people. I know that there are a lot of internal affairs complaints where all it is what the police officer says and what the complainant says. And you have to sit and try to decide who's credible.
Do you think your experience as an attorney, particularly as a defense attorney, would in any way make you less than impartial?
No, no.
Have you ever represented an officer?
I have. I also do domestic work, so I've represented police officers in divorces and custody matters.
Okay.
And living in Dutchtown, I've called police officers quite a bit.
So what would happen, I guess I should be talking to this. So what would happen if any of the officers that were ever involved in any of your outside cases, if they came before this board, what would you do in that case?
So if there was a police officer I had represented previously or that I had previously had contact with, I understand that we're in charge of sort of putting together our own rules and regulations. I would imagine that when we have very strict ethics as lawyers, and part of those are conflict. We have conflict rules, and I would imagine when we put our rules together for any of us, if any of us had a conflict of interest, we would put together rules, I would imagine, similar to the attorney ethics rules, to either recuse ourselves or do some sort of review to make sure whoever was going to be hearing the case could be impartial or wasn't, and potentially affected by any conflict they might have.
Okay. So one of the questions I've kind of reserved for just the attorneys that have been nominated is, what is your position about this board not having subpoena power?
Well, we haven't really started anything yet. I think it's a little early to decide whether it's going to work or not. I think obviously once we get into it and we see how it's going to function, then we'll be able to determine whether it's going to work or not work with or without subpoena power.
And if, shortly into the future, if you see that it is not necessarily working, or if you feel like it does need additional powers, would you be comfortable asking this Board of Aldermen to try to give you those additional powers?
I mean, I guess if we get into it, and everybody's cooperative, hopefully, I would hope that everybody would want this for the city and everybody would want to be sort of open and honest to us and let us do our job. But if we are hitting roadblocks, I would hope that as a group, we would agree that, potentially we might need to amend the rules that are set up, but I think it's a little premature to decide, if we need to do that or not.
That's it.
That it? Okay. Okay. No, Alderman Vaccaro, no questions. Alderman Cone?
I'll pass for a moment.
Want me to come in?
Relations? Didn't ask if she had any relatives.
Oh, well, okay, do we have one?
Alderman Vaccaro,
Having,
you said no. Did you say you didn't have anything on?
Yeah, I'll pass for now.
Okay, Alderman
because
Vaccaro.
I thought you did a good job of covering everything, but the one question you didn't ask is, do you have any relatives that are on the police department or friends? I mean, that you associate with?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Carter.
Another question that Alderman French missed was, have you had any negative run-ins with the police?
Not personally, I haven't.
Has anyone in your family?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Sure, thank you. Hi, Heather. Can you talk about your involvement with some of the organizations you've listed here, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Clout, and kind of what drove you to be a part of those organizations and what that involvement looks like?
So, Clout is an organization of lawyers and judges, and what we do is we meet every month and we pick some sort of nonprofit, and then we either raise money, we collect food, clothing, whatever it is that organization needs, and we do that every month. I've been involved with Big Brothers and Big Sisters.
That's in the evening, so.
I think I started about 9 years ago. I just felt like I had a lot to offer, and that I could sort of connect. Kids always like me. I think I look young, so they probably trust me. And that was a good experience. And then just recently, last year, I started doing another mentoring organization called Join Hands. which is sort of run by Judge Burton in St. Louis County. And it's a mentoring program for children in high school, trying to get them into college from the start of freshman year in high school on to their freshman year of college, and mentoring them through that process.
Thank you for that. So, sounds like, I mean, in some ways, that's a part of your community, and you're involved in volunteer efforts. Are you involved in I know Dutchtown really struggles with not having an official neighborhood association, so perhaps you wouldn't be a part of that, not for your own disinterest, but because of the lack of the infrastructure there. But are you involved in your immediate neighborhood in other ways?
We do. We actually tried to do, I know what they did in Lafayette Park with the citizens, going through the neighborhood, and some of my neighbors and I sort of did the training, and I think everybody kind of lost interest. I don't know, it kind of fell apart a little bit. But as far as my immediate neighborhood and my neighbors, we all know each other. Everybody looks out for each other. If we see anything suspicious, we will call and try to make sure that our community is safe kind of where we are, even if there is no organization to help everybody else in the community.
Great. Well, I think that between myself and the others, we've covered a lot. Thank you so much for your volunteering to be a member of the board.
Alderwoman Green?
Just one quick question about, time commitment. Obviously, we don't know how long or how often this board's going to have to meet, for how long. With, your legal practice and all of that, how is the flexibility of your schedule or the ability to dedicate time?
So I've actually thought about that, and I do have 2 other partners I work with. There are some things that would be immovable, like trial settings that I'd have to work around. But other than other things in my schedule, people are usually pretty, easy about, hey, I have something that's come up. Can we continue our case to this day, or finding another lawyer to cover something if I needed to be present somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Davis? No questions? Alderman Cone?
I do. I just want to, you were here for the last round of questioning, so I think the questions are fairly similar from all of us. But being an attorney, you obviously handle a lot of, confidential matters. So I'm not going to ask you that particular question, but, one of the questions that has been asked of, I believe, all the candidates so far has been around the issue of this conflict of interest and whether or not, folks would recuse themselves if they're friends of, an officer or, someone else who's been subjected to wrongful doing by an officer. I wish we had the same level of disclosure here at the Board of Aldermen. I don't think that we recuse ourselves when we're voting on issues that pertain to our own friends, but I would ask, while you all are going through that process, to look at not just recusal, but also disclosure of a potential conflict as well. So just to throw that out there, I think that that's going to be probably more so important as just disclosing any relationships, which I think as an attorney you all do as part of your own rules as well.
Right.
When you're in front of a judge. So I think that would probably be very helpful.
Right.
That complete you?
I find it a little interesting defining a relationship such as friend. What constitutes a friend? Is it someone who you're friends with on Facebook that you've never met before, or is it someone that you've received a campaign donation from? I mean, who is a friend? We don't know, but I do think that disclosing relationships is going to be very important. Mm-hmm.
So you have a BS in criminology and a BA in Spanish.
Yes.
And you got both of those that's in 98?
Yes.
Interesting combination. Okay, I appreciate it. If there's no other questions from members of the committee, again, we thank you for your interest in coming forward to sit before the committee today. Thank you very much. Next, we have up Mr. Lawrence Johnson. You can come up and take this seat. You've been here for a while. You got in here before I got in here this morning. We appreciate your being here. Again, this is a new process for the Board of Aldermen and really for the city of St. Louis, and so we're making history, but it's also a learning curve. And we thank you for having an interest in serving on the Civilian Oversight Board. If you would just take a moment to talk a little bit about yourself and then why you're also interested in serving on the board.
Okay, thank you for having me here this morning. About myself, I'm new to St. Louis, so I don't know many of you or the particular players in the city. I came to St. Louis in 2007 after having retired as Equal Opportunity Officer at the University of Illinois at Springfield. I have a legal background. I've served as General Counsel for the Massachusetts Office of Affirmative Action. I've served as Executive Director of the Council on Legal Education Opportunity. I've served as Human Relations Director at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I served as Director of the Reintegration Project that helped persons with HIV in prison return to their societies. So I have an extensive history of social engagement. And I think a combination of my legal background and my social engagement, plus probably the defining element that I'm retired, makes me a very unique and qualified applicant for this board. We have a saying in my church that you're at the right place at the right time, and it seems like that's it for me. I'm at the right place at the right time. I was chair of the Springfield Race Relation Task Force, Springfield, Illinois, in 2006 when they were investigating the possibility of a review board there. They since have launched a review board in Springfield, Illinois. But we learned during that process where we had a public forum that invited, national experts in to kind of school us on what it involves. We learned that it can be a hefty engagement. But having said all that, the time and work I've spent in my neighborhood and throughout the city of St. Louis in the 8 years I've been here convinced me that I want to be a part of the solution in what's going on in our city. So that's why I asked my older person, Steve Conway, to recommend me for the board.
Thank you. Alderman French, any questions?
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning.
So that was going to be my first question, is if you had contacted anybody or if anybody had contacted you about being nominated. So did you, did somebody contact you first, or did you?
I approached Alderman Conway. I was then president of the Shaw Neighborhood Improvement Association, and Alderman Conway, as a standard practice, reports at all of our general membership meetings, as does the captain from our police district. Those are standard, reportings, and also the circuit attorney office, all report at our ongoing monthly membership meetings. So when I had, over the 2-year term as president of SNEA, developed a close working relationship with Conway. He said in my last meeting that he had 341 emails from me in the previous year about issues going on in our neighborhood. So that's the kind of relationship I have developed with Steve. And so I approached him saying, hey, Steve, I would like to be considered for this, how to make it happen. And so he then told me to contact the mayor's office. There was an application process. I also contacted CapCar and went through their application process. So I initiated my consideration by you.
So you did go through the CapCar process?
Yes. I think I was the recommended candidate from District 4 by the CapCar Outreach Committee.
Okay. So do you think that a civilian oversight board is needed, and what do you think its role is?
Well, I think the ordinance has properly stated the role for the board. That is to make it, to increase the public transparency of the operation of the police department. I currently have a resident of Shaw who's complaining that he filed a complaint with the police department. At the first level, it wasn't sustained. He said he filed an appeal. He's gotten no word back, and he's sent out several emails to different people in the Shaw neighborhood saying, what can I do, what can I do? As other nominees have mentioned, the confidence in our police department is waning. So I think that building that confidence, building that trust and confidence between the public and the police department, I think is paramount for COB. And also, I think our review of the police department policies and procedure and the public education that we're supposed to do is paramount for COB. So I think it's all vital, the tasks that you have, and authority that you've given to COB in your ordinance.
Okay. And everybody has a unique voice, so what would be your unique voice or perspective on this board?
I think my unique voice would be over 30 years of investigating complaints of discrimination. And from that practice, I think I have a sense for the dynamics that occur within our society. Our authority is to look at harassment, racial profiling, abuse of authority, discourtesty, in the various complaints of discrimination that I have investigated by myself. All of those various issues have been raised, and I think I can bring a perspective to resolving apparent differences.
Okay. Looking through your application here, so first, as you say, you aren't from St. Louis, so I can't ask you what high school you went to. But
Champaign Central. At the time, it was just Champaign High. There was no second high school. If you just either went to Champaign High School or that's it.
But I do notice on your application that you did not identify as African American. Can you explain that?
Yes, that is grounded in my spiritual belief that humans are one race, and that has, recently been proven by science that we're 99.95% the same, that our skin color and facial differences are just that. They don't constitute different races. And at a practical level, that's because I don't want to read in the Post-Dispatch, because we define black as bad, and that's just a fact of our society. I don't want to read in the Post-Dispatch that Lawrence Johnson, the black COB member, said ABC. Because if the Post-Dispatch reports that Lawrence Johnson, the black COB member, said ABC, then whatever ABC is, there will be a subconscious disconnect between what I'm saying and what the public perceives. I mean, we now know that the subconscious triggers faster than the conscious. And so blacklist, black male, black magic, all of that will get triggered before people get to ABC. So it's a combination of my spiritual belief and it's strategic. I do not want my comments to be broadcasted as black comments.
Okay. I appreciate your response and your position. I wish it was that easy, though, getting the Post-Dispatch to just report things like that. What experience have you had with, good or bad, with police officers? I see in your application you describe an incident when you were lost as a child and was found and returned to your family by police officers. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, but then anything else a little bit more recently.
Okay, as you said, my application basically states that as a preschooler, I was enrolled in a public summer program on the University of Illinois campus. I got lost. I was walking with a girl, and she started crying, and this police cruiser, he might have been campus police, came by, and she was crying, and I got embarrassed because she was embarrassing me. But the policeman stopped and got us to where we were supposed to go, which was another facility on the other side of campus. I also report there that I've had a couple incidences where I was in fact committing traffic violations and I was released with warnings, but there were a couple instances, once in Springfield, where I turned purportedly without signaling and I was stopped and questioned. Clear day, no possibility of any kind of injury to anyone, but I was stopped and questioned, not ticketed, but stopped and questioned. Also one time when walking through a neighborhood in Boston, I was stopped and questioned as to where I was going. So I have had some suspicious kinds of run-in with the police, but also as president of SNEA, as I said earlier, our police district reports at our general meetings. So I've had cordial, well, not always cordial, but I have worked with Captain Blashak when he was in District 3. I've worked with Captain Deba when he was in District 3, and I worked with Captain Swiderski when he was in District 2. And I must say my working relationship with Captain Swiderski, who is now retired, was a very favorable one. He provided police officers to our Shaw conversations. We started a group of conversations in the Shaw neighborhood responsive to the Michael Brown shooting. Little did we know that there would be the Von Derek Meyer shooting, a month later. But the conversations began as a way for our community to talk about the issue of police-community relationships. And what does that mean for the Shaw neighborhood? Like I said, Von Derek Meyer jumped off the following month, and it immediately shifted from being an academic exercise to being a, all hands on deck exercise. But those conversations continue to today, and during those series of conversations, we did have a community and police engagement kind of subgroup of that, and Captain Swiderski had police officers come and join in that dialogue. So all in all, I understand that our police officers have a tough job to do. Like any profession, like we lawyers, there's some good guys, some bad guys, and most of them are just trying to get through the day, doing the job as best they can.
In your 8 years in St. Louis, have you had any negative run-ins with St. Louis police officers specifically?
No, I have not.
More positive experiences?
No real experiences. I've had no engagement personally with St. Louis police officer stopping me, other than my talking with the officers as they came to our community meetings. I haven't had any engagement with the St. Louis police officers at all.
So any family members or friends who are employed by the St. Louis Police Department?
No, none.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. We'll call next out. Alderman Cone.
No questions at this time.
Alderman Carter.
No question.
Alderwoman Spencer.
Sure, thank you, Lawrence. It says here, so I was looking at your community involvement, which is also impressive, serving as the president of the Shaw Neighborhood Improvement Association and as chair of the Shaw Neighborhood Accountability Board. Would you mind talking about what drove you to your involvement in those and what your involvement looks like?
As I prefaced, social activism has just been in my blood forever. I mean, the list of things I just gravitate to civic engagement. The president of Shaw Neighborhood Improvement Association came after being vice president for a year, and came after being chair of our Sherman School Committee that tried to save our neighborhood school in the Shaw neighborhood. It since has closed. But coming to the city of St. Louis in 2007, I immediately got engaged in the Neighborhood Improvement Association. As I suggested, it's a quite vigorous neighborhood association. We average between 80 to 100 members at our membership meeting. I currently continue to be co-chair of our youth committee. One thing that we are recognizing in the Shaw neighborhood is that we're changing neighborhood. We're kind of bifurcated with a senior set that's still there and a younger set that's returning to the city. But that kind of middle demographic that has the kids, basically that teenager to young adult kid, is decreasing, and we got some communication issues between them. So we decided we needed to more actively outreach to our teenage population, and I and a co-chair have been working on that for 8 months now, 9 months now, and that's a tough nut to crack. We're having, as a couple of you know, I've gotten on Twitter recently thinking I'd find them, but they've already moved to Snapchat, Instagram, and some other form of communication, so I still can't find them to know what they're thinking about. So And the whole, we talk about authority between police and community, the whole authority within the family, when you get a commitment from the parent that does not necessarily commit the child. So when you're outreaching to the family and say, Mom, will Joe show up at our program on Saturday? And she says, sure. On Saturday, Joe doesn't show up because Joe hasn't consented to going to the program on Saturday. His mom has, or his dad had, or somebody else had. So I continue to be engaged with Shaw Neighborhood Improvement Association right now as a co-chair of the youth committee, which also means I continue on the board. As to the Neighborhood Accountability Board, if you're not familiar with it, that's the restorative justice program of the juvenile division. What it tries to do is to track juveniles who commit minor offense through a non-adjudicative process. So basically, we take youngsters and mentor them for 6 months and give them, kind of assignments to stay in touch or to do other kinds of things to obviate the need for going to court and being adjudicated delinquent. A problem with our Shaw board is most of the kids we see don't come from Shaw, and recently we are seeing fewer and fewer. But that's one of the responsibilities I have given up, because I imagine that COB will take quite a bit of my time. So that I've given up. Another thing that may not be mentioned on my application, I don't recall if I mentioned it or not, I'm also on the Juvenile Disproportionate Minority Contact and Confinement Committee, DMC, and I've given that up. I periodically go through my civic commitments and pair back to what I think I can effectively do. And assuming that I'm approved for COB, I thought I needed to pull back from some of the other engagements. So going forward, NAB and DMC will be off my radar.
Thank you. And I had a question regarding, let's see, you listed as one of your published pieces, something here, remarks to the Ferguson Commission by Lawrence Johnson, as the Shaw Neighborhood president. Would you mind speaking about that, kind of your thoughts on that, and what that publication spoke to?
Well, that spoke to specifically how the Shaw neighborhood responded to the Von Derek Meyer shooting.
Sure.
We immediately, in addition to the Shaw conversations that were initiated by the Neighborhood Association, we have a standing safety committee. Our safety committee began to kind of beef up, and we were monitoring nightly for weeks, assisted the demonstrations like the one that is going to occur tonight at Shaw and Clem in the Shaw neighborhood, Shaw Boulevard and Clem Street in the Shaw neighborhood. The activity that was going on and followed them as they went through. I must admit that I would turn in about 10 or 11, but some member of our Shaw neighborhood safety group were out to 1 and 2 in the morning, along with Alderman Conway, who made it most nights. So basically, I reported to the Ferguson Commission our response to Von Derek Meyer shooting. We also had many other families bringing food to the Von Derek Meyer family. We also had peace vigils separate from what persons might characterize as protest vigils. We had some church forums talking about the issue. So basically, my report to the Ferguson Commission was summed up by what we found in the studies of the community response to the Sandy Hook hurricanes, that when you have strong community kind of resilience, you're more effective to overcome these kind of crises. And I just kind of laid out for them all the different ways that the Shaw neighborhood responded to and came together responsive to that shooting, and how it could inform other communities who encountered the same experience.
Great, thank you. I think that's all for me.
Alderwoman Green.
Thank you. answered, or everybody has asked most of my questions already, but I just wanted to say, thank you for the Shaw conversations. I represent the area south of the park, and we actually have quite a few residents who have been attending the Shaw conversations and figuring out how we can bring that south of the park and kind of do the same thing, because we've seen kind of the power and the strength of having some of those critical conversations. So just really appreciate that.
Well, thank you. We've learned that it's a forum where persons who don't come to meetings kind of settings feel more comfortable going to, and a safe haven to kind of just share. What we're now, after about a year and a half into it, what we're now trying to do is to develop a mechanism that captures any consensus that arise in the conversation and bring it to a more institutionalized forum in either the neighborhood association or some other kind of ongoing task force or committee. But yes, I appreciate your commendation, but we do think it's been a useful adjunct to our neighborhood meetings.
Agreed. Thank you.
Alderman Vaccaro, any questions? Alderwoman Davis. What's the question?
Just a very brief comment. Read on the document that was supplied to the application. Only a tip of the iceberg. Johnson's leadership in Shaw neighborhood is true. When most of them like they should have. Demonstration of leadership that's been above and beyond. A lot of things were accomplished under your leadership. I just want to thank you. I only have 3 blocks to Shaw, so I'll step out front. I'm on the Conway. I'll take the road, but I appreciate what you've done.
Thank you very much. I remember when we were working with you about the Thurman Underpass, trying to restore and reconnecting Shaw to Botanical Heights. Thank you very much for your comments.
Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Any? Okay then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My pleasure. We did talk about that. That's that question. That completes all that we have here for today. I remind the committee that we do have the public hearing where we take public testimony next Tuesday. That'll be 6 in the evening. We were also still possibly planning the reception where people could come and meet the nominees. That'll be around 5:30 here in these chambers as well. But I'll send out a notice on that. We're also trying to get somebody to foot the bill for refreshments. We haven't worked it all out yet, other than the chairman. So if there's no other discussion or comments on that, then our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.